I'd like to thank and give a shout out to Nilka Bartel, a great partner of ours at Parks. Nilka, hopefully it's here somewhere. Thank you, Nilka. One, for inviting me here today, and for all that she does for the Bronx. And of course, I want to thank the Bronx Coalition for Parks and Green Spaces for organizing this important event every year. In the past year has been a successful one at New York City Parks, with several major accomplishments right here in the Bronx. Among them, $41 million in upgrades to Starlight Park, which we know is huge, representing a major green space expansion in the Bronx that links to the Bronx River Greenway. We celebrated the opening of Bronx Point, which brings much-needed public space, access to the waterfront, and affordable housing to the South Bronx. We also launched the first ever public programming on Hart Island, the city's public burial ground for more than 100 years. And I'm so pleased to say that our urban park rangers are now leading walking tours on the island twice per month. They're here, they have a table, check them out and learn more about the programming. It's such a fascinating place to visit, and we're so proud to be able to help make that happen. In June of last year, I launched with my team at Parks, Let's Green NYC, a campaign to help build community connections and combat the epidemic of loneliness by engaging a record number of New Yorkers in caring for our parks and our green spaces. I'm proud to say that we launched and that we have recorded more than 400,000 people have given their time to volunteer at New York City Parks. It's an incredible testament to the power of people coming together. We want to illuminate and highlight and celebrate that good work, of which you are all a part of. So we're thrilled that we're able to recognize folks, and this total is nearly double the number of annual volunteers that we estimated in prior years. It shows the importance of counting, recognizing, and what we want to do, which is celebrate all of that good work that happens across our park system. It's very unique to the Parks Department. Other agencies don't have that kind of commitment to the work that we do, and we know that we're stronger and better because of it. Parks, as you know, has had such a long legacy of working with volunteers. That's what this whole event is about. And through this initiative, through Let's Green NYC, we're looking to not only expand our reach, but also to uplift and recognize all of our very valued partners. We were also very proud to announce that in the last fiscal year, Parks reached its highest tree planting totals in 6 years. Well done. That deserves a clap, absolutely. Amid all of these successes, I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge that there are budget challenges currently facing all city agencies. And as Mayor Adams has made very clear, the city is facing a difficult fiscal situation, and every agency has needed to make some tough decisions. We're grateful that the mayor has announced the reversal of proposed cuts to the Parks Opportunity Program, and also, thankfully, canceled the next round of agency budget cuts and eased the hiring freeze. All good news and really important. But under this administration, we've made significant efforts and investments to improve our parks and to keep them safe and clean. And we're committed to investing in our parks and ensuring every New Yorker can take advantage of our unmatched public green spaces. I want to extend my gratitude to the team at New York City Parks, many of whom are here, and all of whom work tirelessly to make our parks the best that they can possibly be. I want to give a big shout out to our fabulous First Deputy Commissioner, Iris Rodriguez Rosa, is in the house. We also are so pleased to have our Deputy Commissioner of Environment and Planning, Jennifer Greenfeld, is with us. and our fearless leader here in the Bronx, Borough Commissioner Jacinia Ponte. I also want to thank and give a shout out to our PEP officers and maintenance staff who work tirelessly every day to keep our parks clean and safe. Our urban park rangers, our recreation staff, and so many more that you encounter in our parks here in the Bronx and all over the city. We're also so grateful to all of the advocates, community members, and volunteers who are here today, who give of your time and effort to support and enhance our great green space all over the city. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your passion and your advocacy. You are vital to our city's green spaces, and together we know that we can achieve great green things. Thank you so much. Enjoy the day, and congratulations on 30 years of the Bronx Speak Up. Thanks so much.
Please, another round of applause for Commissioner Sue Donahue. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge several other attendees who've arrived here at the Bronx Park Speak Up. Today we also have Melissa Enoch, the Acting Assistant Commissioner for the Bureau of Environmental Planning and Analysis at DEP. And also we have Victor Martinez, who's with Representative Richie Torres' office. So without further ado, we're going to go into our first presentation, who is, it's going to be presented by Dart Westfall, the past president of the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality, and he will present on the Bronx waterways and greenways 30 years later.
Thank you. How do I change the
arrow keys or space bar? Okay.
down? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 30th Bronx Park Speak Up. It's sort of, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dart Westfall. I was the MC for the first 10 of these things, and I'm sort of in the back end of being involved in this sort of stuff. But I do want to make sure people understand where we've come from so we can figure out where we're going, right? So this is a picture of the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality, which is sort of the umbrella over a lot of these things, like the Speak Up and the Bronx Coalition for Parks and Green Spaces. On a boat ride on the Clearwater in 1988, our founder, Teresa Leto, who was the secretary of the group, and if you want to know why the founder thought being secretary was the most important thing, talk to Karen Argenti over there and she'll explain it to you. She said, let's go on a boat ride and see the open space and the waterfront of the Bronx from the water side. And so we did two of them. This was the Clearwater. You've got the third head over is John Gillen. If Dr. Gillen is here somewhere, he'll be here if he's not here right now. Now teaching at Ostos Community College way back then. So we did the whole coastline of the Bronx, the East Bronx first on the Clearwater in '88. And then in 1989, we took the Bronx Queen. If anybody remembers the Bronx Queen, it was a fishing boat in the middle of the Bronx River way, way back. And it was actually a gambling boat. They'd go out and play poker and stuff and tell their wives that they were fishing. But we took that from the Bronx River out into Westchester Creek and then up through the Harlem River and down and around, waiting for the tide to go down so we could get under the Broadway Bridge. And then went out on the Broadway Bridge, they opened the rail bridge, and we went out into the Hudson River and thought about what kind of greenways and parklands we could be developed throughout this part of the Bronx. That's Paul Barizzi, who was the first administrator of both Van Cortlandt and Pelham Bay Parks way back then. That's Paul Mankiewicz. Is Paul here yet? He'll get here. That's Paul Mankiewicz in 1989. And this kid is 41 years old. Think about that for a second. Out there on the Bronx Queen, looking at the waterfront of the Bronx. I know he's 41 because that's my son. He's got two kids. This is Commissioner Stern, who was at the first Bronx Park Speak Up. I mentioned that to Commissioner Donahue that, be careful because, 30 years later, your picture and what you say at these things is going to be remembered. Right? There's Henry at the Bronx Botanical Garden. The first one was at the Botanical Garden. And you notice I said the Bronx Botanical Garden. This was the Greenway plan then in 1993 that under Borough President Ferrer was put together from a lot of different sources of people talking about greenways in the Bronx, okay? So our thinking as an organization was waterways and greenways. They sort of go together. How can we combine those two ideas and improve the quality of the water and create more open space in our along our greenways and get people to them? So about half of the working board for this, you know, the community board chairs and everything were the committee that made the recommendations. But the worker bees, as Diane Sargent, who was the chair, is Diane here yet? I thought I saw her at the table somewhere. She used to call us the worker bees, and about half of that group, with different identifications, was Bronx Council for Environmental Quality. It was BCEQ's people, the people Teresa dragged together, that were half of the folks that did the planning for this Greenway plan. And I see a couple of commissioners of operations sitting in the back pointing at different lines, because they have told me, both those gentlemen over there have told me that this gray book was used for years and years and years as a way to think about where those greenways should go. And we can get through a lot of them, but we're just going to start with the Harlem River one. This was one of the pages in that Greenway plan. And we're going to think about what's happened since '88 in terms of thinking about parks and greenways, particularly along the waterways, right? So one of them is the Harlem River and Putnam outfall. This is from a Hudson River plan from way back when. But this is actually happening. We are going to daylight the Tibbetts Brook and close down that CSO and make the water cleaner and have a beautiful bit of greenway and parkland over there. Okay, this was 1997. You know, remember that 6-year-old that's 41 now. These things take a long time. And as someone that's, you know, retired from being the speaker at the Speak Up, the MC at the Speak Up, I'm here to tell you, you know, be prepared. Be prepared. But this one's actually going to happen. And this one happened, Bridge Park along the Harlem River. There it is. You can go there now. You can ride your bicycle there now. The High Bridge is open. Okay, after decades of people, where's Chauncey? Chauncey Young's around here somewhere. Yep. Chauncey and his friends and the folks he organized, you know, and Parks and a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of money and Congressman Serrano and everybody else got that thing open. From there, I thought I had another one. From there, you're starting to think about, well, what are we going to do next? So the people thinking about the Harlem River Greenway, these are parking lots. Okay, a circus goes on there every year, because they only use when the Yankees are in town, and they probably don't even use them then much, right? So this is part of that Yankee Stadium thing about which we have mixed feelings, honestly. But nevertheless, there's some space there right along the Harlem River that could be programmed like this and activated like this. And we have a whole plan that MIT did a bunch of years ago to talk about how you might do that sort of thing. EDC owns it. I don't know what's going on with it, but you know, it's an option. It's something we could do. It's the next stage of all of this stuff. From there, you get to a park. What is this park? Say again? Mill Pond Park, right? From there, and so we're thinking about the water too, right? So underneath the highway at Mill Pond Park, we built a temporary constructed wetland. And that's Paul again, some years later than the first picture, planting things in this construction wetland that we built to take the water from the highway and do something with it before it goes into the Harlem River. And I bring this up because the next thing happening is a great big project by the Bronx River where the Cross Bronx Expressway is going to get rebuilt. For those that don't know, BCQ will have a meeting on April 24th about that. But a big project is going to go on there, and something's going to happen with that runoff. And is it going into the Bronx River? Is it going to be absorbed by the parkland? Well, we have examples of how you can do something like that. That property now is this project now, which is the Bronx Point project that Commissioner Donahue talked about. But it will provide greenway from Mill Pond Park down to 149th Street, which we, of course, refer to as the 149th Street Bridge, not the 145th Street Bridge. From there, this park was broken, the ground has been broken on the 144th Street site, the EDC site. There will be parkland there too. From there, we get to private developments that do have walkways along the waterfront. It's part of what the city's waterfront regulations require. So you're going to have, how do you connect this to this? Well, we'll get to that. I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, but we'll talk about how are you going to figure all that stuff out. How are you going to get from one of these things to the next one? You got to get around a bunch of stuff. This is the end of Lincoln Avenue. This was part of that MIT plan that we had people do a long time ago. Can we get some open space down there along Lincoln Avenue? And South Bronx Unite has got a plan for how to connect that to other places that they would like to see happen. I don't know if they've got a table. I don't know who's here, if Michael is here, but either way, those folks are doing all this stuff. How to figure out getting around to our favorite thing, Randall's Island, the Randall's Island Connector. Another one that took, by the time you talk to the railroad 6 times, ask the people at the Bronx River, many of whom are sitting around here, how long it took to get Amtrak to let them build the Greenway along the railroad in the park, and somebody's laughing in the back of the room. So getting this to happen was an incredible accomplishment. It was a really big deal. I mean, it's obviously was there. It was obviously what should happen, but it wasn't like you just snap your fingers and these things go on. But there it is. It's got this little bicycle repair thing on the side with a pump and the ratchets and stuff you need to fix your bike if you're there, if your brake shoes are loose or something. It's a wonderful thing. Next, okay, these are the piers at 130 whatever street, that when they used to take railroad cars out of barges and move them into the rail yard. Well, they could look like this. They could be a Bronx landing thing like they have in Queens. There's a museum, there's like sculpture around the one in Queens. You could do the same thing in the Bronx. There was actually a Richard Serra sculpture. Everybody know Richard Serra, Tilted Arc, down by the federal building? There was a big controversy decades ago. He stored, I should have put that picture up too. He stored one of his pieces there for years, and we found it. And Harry Bubbins and I and a bunch of people would ride our bikes down there and look at this thing, right? And I had a student, Manhattan College, there's 6 or 7 of them floating around here, they're all over there, who worked for the gallery that sold his stuff and called up his agent and said, you got this piece over here hidden in the South Bronx somewhere. Couldn't we put it in a park somewhere and make it be they moved it like in 20 minutes. That thing was gone. Sometimes you got to, make a little trouble. Anyway, so this is that sort of part of the waterfront in Port Morris. And of course, to get from one to the other, we have Sustainable South Bronx, Majora Carter, et cetera, figuring out this whole plan around the Hunts Point and Longwood neighborhoods. And here's Hunts Point Landing. It's there. South Bronx Riverside Park is there. All these places have happened since the '93 Greenway Plan and the waterway work that we've been doing. I'll go quickly. This is the first flotilla. Now we're going up the Bronx River. Here's what it looks like today. The concrete plant park is fantastic. Someday we'll get a bathroom. It's a wonderful thing. I'm just saying, there's bathrooms along there. I got to tell you, the Parks Department at some point, I think Commissioner Aponte of blessed memory was the Bronx commissioner at the time, and the bathrooms in the parks got really much, much better. No, seriously, they're clean. They don't have graffiti on them. There's doors on the stalls. They have toilet paper. There's heat in the bathroom in Van Cortlandt Park. This is wonderful. They don't shut them down in October every year. I mean, if you're running in the winter, it's kind of nice to have a place you get a drink of water inside. It was amazing when, and I asked him about that, and he said that we've been working really hard to make this happen. It makes a big difference. So anyway, next one maybe, right? There is a beautiful new bathroom at Starlight. And this is Starlight, which is obviously, encouraged people to think people might want to move into the neighborhood if you make a park nicer. So Starlight is gorgeous. That's that greenway that I was talking about that, the people at the railroad weren't really thrilled about having. But you got to keep going. This is Gun Hill Road. This is the connection to Shoelace Park from the area to the south, from this little thing called Fort Knox that has also been worked on in the last few years, and from there you get south into the forest and all the way down the Bronx Greenway. I want to live long enough to be able to ride my bicycle from the city line to Soundview Park perfectly. That's my goal in life, okay? I said that in the beginning when the Bronx River Alliance started, and it's going to almost there, 177th Street. You know, that 177th Street thing, and that's where they're doing the Cross Bronx thing. Anybody that cares about that stuff, talk to me about it, because I'm really hyped up about it. That's the big missing link in the whole thing, I think, but that's been true since like the 1980s. But anyway, so this is a beautiful little sitting area just by Gun Hill Road by Shoelace Park. Karen tells me, now let's remember this, you know, all those beautiful things, this is what it used to look like. And if anybody says things don't get better, show them this picture, and then show them Starlight Playground, because that's where this was. That's where the National Guard came and dragged, I don't know, somebody else, 35 or something cars out of the Bronx River, right? So just remember that now looks like this, right? Yeah, yeah. And not for nothing, but DOT would have turned this into a staging area for the project that's happening now. Back in 1996, if people in the neighborhood hadn't said, no. Just saying. All right. We keep going. Soundview Park. Soundview Park was mentioned, getting a huge, I ride my bike there all the time. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. We had one of our BCEQ meetings in the park house there like 10 years ago, watching this have the trees and it's not just the Alliance, it's everybody. It's everybody. The Friends of Soundview, I think, are here. I saw their table before, right? Nothing, Frederick Douglass, power exceeds nothing without a demand. We're not here demanding stuff. No one's going to give you anything. Pugsley Creek Park, we used to go there and plant stuff. Helen Reel, we planted some trees for Helen Reel, one of the early leaders of BCEQ. I got to run through these. And speaking of bathrooms, Ferry Point Park. Got their back. Okay? I don't know where Dottie Pogge is, but I'm sure everybody in the Parks Department knows Dottie Pogge's name, because for how many decades, can we please have a bathroom? There's people playing soccer all over the place. Blah, blah, blah. Ferry Point, interesting with the golf course and the gambling, and it's another one we have to pay attention to. Getting from one side to the other, you should be able to go under the bridge, right? You got to go out to the street and walk around. It's silly. Just go. You can go under the bridge on the other side, and the Queen side, and in whatever that Little Frogs Park or whatever it's called, right? Yeah, there's a little park there. You just go under the bridge. What's the big deal? Anyway, and here's the other side. Here's the other side of Ferry Point Park. It's gorgeous. The walkway is open over there. You can go there, and Hart Island. As I mentioned before, we get all the way around past Ferry Point out to Hart Island. And there it is, and I'm definitely signed up to go to one of those things. In my last minute, quick, this is what Yankee Stadium looked like when it was first built. You will notice that there isn't much there. The idea that there were spectacular parks back in those days, no, there really weren't. It looked like this, a dirt road. Okay, so I'm not young enough, I'm not old enough to be that nostalgic, but here's what it looks like today. That park and that track looks a little better than the other one. This is where the fountain wasn't, and see how old the cars are? It's like the 1940s maybe, right? And now it looks like this, right? So these are all the plans. This is not all the plans that we had to do just for the Harlem River. If you go on the BCEQ website, which is wonderful, thank you, Karen, and the people that actually run it, you'll see 25 different things about getting the Greenway on the Harlem River thing to happen. And this is just the big ones: MIT, Pratt, Columbia University, a BOA, a watershed plan. Thank you, Commissioner Greenfield and everybody else. So it does take a long time, but you can see things happen if you are persistent. And I know this crowd, you definitely are. And that ends my time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dart, for that excellent walk through history, 30 years of all this planning that has been going on in the borough. I actually remember when the plan came out in '93. I was a senior in Cardinal Spellman High School, and it's just beautiful. Oh. Got it. Oh, go right ahead. Yes.
Go back to mine. I thought we were going to do that. Sorry. I got to go back. Go back to mine. Yeah, one more. All right. Oh, What'd you do to me? All right. So to talk about the future and what the next steps are about what I was just saying, I apologize for not remembering I was supposed to do this. Margot from the NYC DOT.
Thank you so much, Dart. You were getting amped about the last 30 years that you forgot the future, but so I'm Margot Grew from the New York City Department of Transportation, and I know I've seen a lot of you over the last year. We've been working on the implementation plan for the Harlem River Greenway. And I'm so glad you showed that slide of all of the past plans, because how we think our process is different is that this is an implementation plan. We've done enough visioning over the years. Now we're making it happen. And we have been working hard on developing route alternatives for our 7-mile Harlem River Greenway. The overall animating vision that we're working with the Parks Department and EDC and community partners is to create a 7-mile greenway all the way from Van Cortlandt Park in the north down alongside the Bronx side of the Harlem River to Randall's Island, a beautiful continuous park-to-park greenway for cyclists and pedestrians. So because it's a long and complicated geography, there's a few different routes that we're exploring, and we want to talk about all of those routes with community members. And there's a lot of detail to get into, which I can't do on one slide. So I invite you, I urge you to come to our workshops, which we are announcing today. Next month, we're breaking up the geography into the northern half and southern half, few different options depending on your availability, but please join us and share your ideas for how we can make the Greenway a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And DOT, remember, let's cap the Cross Bronx. So we're going to move on to our next presentation. It's Championing Parks Through Advocacy by Charisse Palomino, who's the Director of Advocacy and Programs for New Yorkers for Parks.
All right. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you to the committee that organized this. I'm here to do a quick presentation on the advocacy work that we're doing to support our Parks Department, especially in the Bronx. So we're going to champion our Bronx parks through advocacy. And just to give you some background, I want to go through the budget history, which is 50 years of austerity. The last time the New York City Parks Department received at least 1% of the city budget was in the 1960s. So when the fiscal crisis hit, the Parks Department their budget was significantly reduced, and we're continuing to see the effects of that austerity today. Over the past several decades, 4 decades really, we can see the disparity in how the city budgets has grown. The disparity with the police department, the Department of Transportation, sanitation, corrections, and even the overall city budget for the expense department, while the New York City Parks Department still remains at a staggering 72% compared to the other city agencies. How does New York City stack up against other major cities? When we look at how our city allocates funding for our Parks Department compared to other major cities, New York City is still significantly lower than most cities. I like to highlight Los Angeles. Los Angeles has 16,000 acres of parkland. And when people think of New York, they don't think of green spaces, they don't think of parks, they think of skyscrapers and a concrete jungle. But New York City has 30,000 acres of parkland. And Los Angeles, with half of that amount of parkland, allocates 2.9% of their city budget to the Department of Parks and Recreation, while New York City is allocating just 0.6%. What does the staffing for the Parks Department look like since the 1960s? You can see here the disparity of how much the Parks Department, how much staffing the Parks Department has had, full-time employees over the decades. So I highlight this to really emphasize the significance in achieving 1% of the city budget for Parks Department. The mayor has campaigned on that promise, and the mayor has also promised to deliver that by the end of his first term, and we need your support to helping hold him accountable to that. So as the commissioner mentioned, there were significant budget cuts this past year where the mayor asked for all city agencies to reduce their budget by 5%. And so what does that budget impact look like for our Parks Department? The existing hiring freeze reduces the park staffing by 500%. 200 park staff members will lose their jobs by the end of June. Fortunately, the mayor announced yesterday afternoon that he's going to reverse some of the cuts, including the future cuts that are allocated. So we are grateful for that, but we still have to fight for our parks. We need to increase staffing so that our parks can be cleaned and maintained, and our Parks Department can deliver the services that are essential for all New Yorkers, especially for our Bronx parks. With this budget reduction, there were some really significant programs that were delayed. There's a tree risk program, trail formalization program, programming for the community gardens, which is in Green Thumb's house, and the swim expansion program. And so we want to make sure that our Parks Department can adequately deliver these core services. So we put together our budget demands that are asking to end the hiring freeze, the complete hiring freeze, that we want to make sure our parks are safe. So we want to add 50 urban park rangers, and we want to increase our PEP officers by 100. We want to make sure our parks are clean, so we need to make sure that we can baseline 100 city park workers and an additional 200 CPWs. We want to make sure that our parks are green and resilient, so we need to make sure that we baseline staffing for our forestry and Green Thumb, and that we're adding new gardeners and additional staffing for forest restoration. I just want to ask if anyone has any thoughts or questions on the state of the budget, and then we'll talk about some of the advocacy stuff.
We're here, and the Parks Commission is sitting in the room with us. And the question is, can you adopt what she just said we should get? And will you fight for us? That you work for us, not for the mayor. You fight for us and you fight for our park. Will you do that?
Can I?
Everybody here is going to ask you the same question.
Can I answer? Can I just, if she wants to answer? I'm going to just let you know, we work very close with the Parks Department, and they're doing the absolute best they can.
No, it's not good enough.
Okay.
It's not good enough. We are not accepting that. You should not accept that. If you want to learn how to be a Bronx person, come back to us again and we'll show you how to fight.
All right, well, thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm a Brooklyn person. I know how to fight. They don't control the budget. And the mayor does control the budget, and the Office of Management and Budget does. But that's why we work closely with advocacy organizations like and the Play Fair Coalition, all the people who are raising their voices in support of parks and our budget. And there is no doubt these are different fiscal times, absolutely.
So you're going to say no to the mayor?
Am I going to say no to the mayor?
Right.
On what? On budget?
Yeah.
I'm only one commissioner, there are many commissioners who are having this budget cut, it's not just mine. And so that's why the
Right.
advocacy is so important.
Does anybody think that's fair? No.
Well, this is like a perfect segue into the next portion, which is the advocacy.
I don't think we have to go any further. What we are doing is we have a speaker, and we need to speak out, folks. I'm not going to be the only one. Tell us what you think.
So this is great because we're going to talk about how you can speak up and how you can get involved in our parks advocacy.
She's the commissioner. We don't have to go any further. She's here, sitting in the room, and she's the commissioner.
We have to make sure that the way the budget works is that the mayor presents a budget and the city council negotiates with the mayor's office. And, right, so we have to make sure that all elements
We know that.
are delivering the budget.
We've been missing the 1% now for 30 years. And
Yes.
zero. So we never got there. So how are we gonna do that? And it's not talking to the city council, and it's not talking to the mayor, and it's talking to the person making the decision, the Parks Commission.
But they're not making the decision about the budget.
She can only do what she can with the amount of money that she's given. So we need to get her more money so she can deliver on those core services and the resources.
She needs to speak up that there is not enough money to call.
We are all speaking up,
Not us. She needs to.
yeah.
Listen, she's the top. That's it. If she doesn't have the power to do that, then what are you doing here? She has the power. No, that's not true. She can say.
But we have a conference, I think, like, you're saying the power is like in everybody here speaking up. I don't think it's gonna be on just one person, even if they are a commissioner.
I disagree.
I understand.
All right, well, thank you.
Like,
Okay, so we all know we want a 21st century park system. So how are we going to get there? Our Playfair Coalition is a group of 400 advocates and organizations that are fighting to increase the parks budget so that our commissioner can deliver on the core services and the kinds of programming that we need. So this week, we launched a campaign called #SaveNYCParks, and I just want to give you some data on it. On Twitter alone, we had 4,321 impressions. And we want everyone in this room to participate in our social media advocacy, our budget advocacy. So there's going to be a hearing on March 21st, which is the preliminary budget. This is the time for your voices to be heard, to show up to City Hall and demand that the City Council push back and fight for an increased budget. We're going to have a rally in May. That's an opportunity for people to show up and make a loud statement and show the mayor that we want 1% of the city budget for parks, that we need to make sure that our park system is adequately funded, that it's prepared for the climate crisis that we're experiencing, that a lot of the infrastructure challenges that we're having can be fixed. All of this happens when we can make sure that we get the funding that our Parks Department needs to deliver on these services. So every Bronx person has a unique reason why they love their parks, and this is an opportunity for everyone to get involved and to step up. So some of our advocacy from now until June, for the rest of the month, we're asking people to continue to meet with their city council members until this preliminary budget happens, the preliminary budget hearing happens. We're asking people to write op-eds, publish them in local newspapers. We want you to continue to push our social media. It's really important to develop the kind of social media engagement as well as the in-person engagement. So we're asking people, if you can, to testify in person or virtually on March 21st. If you cannot testify, you also have an opportunity to submit written testimony. And the more people that engage in that, the more pressure you put on the decision makers, those who are actually making the decision of how much money our city agencies can get. So that's where the real crux of our advocacy work is in fighting to get our city agencies, including the Parks Department, the money that they need to be able to deliver the kind of services that they can. So we will have a city council briefing, which New Yorkers for Parks and our Playfair Coalition is doing next Friday. We're going to be presenting our budget ask to the city council and demanding that they fight harder this year than they have in the past, because we really need to be able to deliver on the services for our communities. So if you have any questions, I'll take questions, but I have a QR code up here. So if everyone can take out your phone, scan the QR code, and sign our petition to the mayor, that will be really helpful in being able to get us towards demanding that goal.
Question, what is the Bronx Clubs? budget negotiations, all I was told was see elected officials, see, because the Bronx Parks has no budget. And all of our budget requests came back, see elected officials, and the council members, the borough president, and even the mayor put money in for park improvements. What is the budget for Bronx Parks?
So the capital and expense budget, and Bronx has its own capital budget for investments that we're making. They don't have the exact number, but we can talk about it.
Why do budget priorities keep coming back? Talks a fund that supports, but does not have the funds for these improvements. And this is what every community wants.
Yeah, because the budget is not unlimited, as you know, and there are a lot of competing priorities. As I said, we put 41 million in Starlight Park, and because recently opened, there has been some enormous investments in Bronx, but we're looking to invest all the Bronx.
And then you had the water filtration mitigation money of $200 million, of which still is being spent. And that's from the early 2000s.
There's a lot of talk about There's a lot of talk there about money in, money that. So I was involved in the Mayor Coalition. What we see every year is a lot of city agencies saying going after the same crop. You know, and let's slice the bread on the table. Yes, the Parks Department should have a much bigger slice of that bread. But maybe we need to talk about the revenue side. We live in the most, I think, financially wealthy city in the country.
World.
Sorry. And more money flows through this city than any other city in the country in the world. And maybe what we need to be thinking about is a revenue stream for specifically for parks. Now, New York City cannot raise its own taxes, its own income tax. We need the permission of the state government. We need the Assembly, New York State Senate, and the governor to sign off on that. So maybe what we need to be thinking of is before the city budget deadline is due, and the state budget is due April 1st, so that's not a lot of time. Maybe we need a tax on the wealthy specifically to go to the New York City Parks Department and other agencies in New York City that have been historically ignored with the excuse that there is no money. Because part of my friends, there is no money, it's a bunch of bull. We live in the richest city, and we should be demanding that the people who have more money pay more, and that's up to our state representatives. And we need a statewide coalition to give New York City a fair show, so we can fund our basic stuff. This is basic stuff. We're not doing things that much smaller cities are doing. And we have so many tourists that come here. Are we the center of the world? I mean, are we? This is the 5 boroughs. The Bronx is one of the 5 boroughs. Why is the excuse there's always no money? That's a bunch of bull. We need wealthy, or whoever it is, to pay more to fund these basic things.
That's great.
I will speak up on that structural reliance on working group on other community. I was here in 2001 when the 1% campaign started. 93 years later, we're not focused on regular way. And I really believe that we should be raising revenue. A budget is a policy document. It's a policy document. Our mayor is saying in one graph, our conception of like COVID and deputy mayor Josh said that the presentation that the like infrastructure will achieve and reporting funds. Well, there is not. That money should be put in parks. This isn't a nice, this is necessary. It's the background. There is partnership. These are the things we always see. So, you know, waiting 25, 30 years for primary park, waiting for big park, we can't wait 25 more years. It was a whole generation of people who can local park that's safe and clean. I think put 2,000 hours in the parks. We are giving the parks department the tools that they need. We are helping them with resources. We are helping basic things like trying to catch 500 feet of ice because they couldn't come to the So I think if we have to say that's enough.
30,000. Thank you. I agree with you in everything you said. It is about priorities, and we have to make it clear that parks need to be elevated as a priority. And that's why the more people that get involved in our advocacy work, the more likely we're able to make incremental slides towards that. The mayor did promise that he wanted to deliver 1% by the end of his term, and we have to hold him accountable to that. And that's why the advocacy is so critical. All right, one more question?
So, Robert, and this is 30 years, everybody, and it's a great opportunity to have a family fight. Because what are those 30 years accomplishments the result of? Collaboration. Why was that collaboration necessary? Because the city government walked away from public funding for our public property. Okay? And we have filled the gap for 30 years. And we're at a point now, we need a new system. Okay, the government is not working. We are in fact supporting parks by $31 an hour is the rate of revenue that your volunteer hours produce. And we came up with, well, 2,000 hours, so that's $63,000 worth of value time to give it to that. So we are providing to the mayor free resources, okay, every year by our own commitment for parks. If we want to get park funded, we need different elected officials who will start direct funding for New York City parks, their public property, and not allow private people to fill the gap and excuse their shortcomings.
Thank you. These are all really great comments, and I welcome you to sign our petition and visit our website and get more involved in our advocacy. Your opinions are really critical, and as I said before, the more people that are involved, the more the mayor will feel the pressure. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharice, for that presentation. And I also want to take a quick moment to acknowledge everyone who spoke up here, Karen and everyone who got up, including the commissioner. This is what the event is about. It's Bronx Park Speak Up. Everything we've done in the Bronx is through advocacy. It's through all these organizations that are here. Everything that has been created in the Bronx in the last few decades was because of organizations and people like Karen and everyone here who's in this audience who got together when the city said, no, we don't have anything, we don't have anything for you, and said no to the Bronx. So really appreciate everyone that provided feedback just now, because I think that's really important, that this is what the Speak Up is for. So without further ado, I'd like to present the next presenter. It's actually our first panel discussion, and I'd like to introduce you Daniel Raniels, the Director of Programs and Operations at the Bronx River Alliance, who will be moderating a panel on using nature to combat climate change.
Thank you all. Yeah, I'm a panelist, if you want to just join us up on the stage, and thank you. Freeze. Okay, Christian, there we go. All right. Yeah. Go ahead and get your sunglasses if you need. Yeah, I don't know. There's probably a shutter function, but they're going to have some. Yeah. They're going to have some presentations also. Yeah, for some of the intro. Okay. Number three. Okay, great. Thank you all. I hope you took a little chance to get a drink or something, and wanted to welcome our panel here. We have a great panel. And I'll do a little short introduction, and then our panelists will also have some slides and introduction to go through. So first up, we have Melissa Enoch, our Acting Assistant Commissioner in the Bureau of Environmental Planning and Analysis at the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. Next up, we have Kevin Kobasa, Deputy Director of Ecological Landscape Architecture for the Natural Resources Group, Capital Design and Construction Team for New York City Parks. After that, we have Christian Murphy, Ecology Coordinator at the Bronx River Alliance. and Shino Tanikawa, Executive Director of the New York City Soil and Water Conservation District. So we want to thank all of our panelists to be here. We're going to give each panelist a little bit of time to introduce themselves and their work. And there might be some slides. You're welcome to come up here and present or sit at the table, whatever you like. And yeah, thank you, Melissa. All right. Sorry, I'm going to have to probably go over to the other computer. Which one is yours?
Do you want me to go over there?
Sorry, one moment.
Got it. Okay. Well, first off, thank you all. A lovely Saturday to be here with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about our green infrastructure program at New York City DEP. For those of you who don't know much about DEP, we are the water utility for the city of New York. We're the largest water and wastewater combined utility in the nation. We provide clean, safe drinking water to over 8 million New Yorkers. We manage air quality, Superfund mitigation, and we also maintain over 7,000 miles of sewers and 14 water resource recovery facilities. So I know a big topic today is climate change and how green infrastructure can help us mitigate that here in New York. Our climate is changing. You're all very much aware of this. And in New York City, something that's particularly of interest to DEP is how much increased rainfall we're receiving. So we have received in the past 3 years, 3 specific events where we had intense precipitation that well exceeded the city's sewer capacity, but even more than that, you know, really destroyed a lot of community infrastructure, and we lost lives, and we have been trying to recover and plan for the future ever since. One thing that, you know, may not be well known to everyone here, in 2023, we experienced rain every 3 days. It was a really wet year last year. I'm sure many of you remember there were many weekends in a row where we were inside because it rained all day. NOAA recently reclassified New York City to be a humid subtropical climate. That's wild, right? So we are now like the Carolinas, and we are anticipated to receive this kind of rainfall moving forward. So I mentioned DEP is the water utility. We have over 7,000 miles of sewers. Sewers are our first line of defense for stormwater management, but green infrastructure is a really important tool for us too. At DEP, we've built over 13,000 distributed green infrastructure assets across the city, and we have thousands more in design and planning. This is a public map that we maintain, and it shows every single location of green infrastructure in the city. You can see some in the Bronx. We're actually coming back to the Bronx with a new tool that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But this is, you know, an important tool for us for many reasons. When we're talking about green infrastructure, we're specifically talking about engineered systems that infiltrate rainwater, store, or convey it. It's important because any green infrastructure that we build, that's like our belts and suspenders. It's the first line of defense. We're trying to keep water out of our sewer system and help the system keep up with demand and operate more efficiently. Typical practices that you might see are our curbside rain gardens. We also build infiltration basins, which are rain gardens that are underneath the ground that kind of blend in with existing conditions. They may have a concrete top or a grass top. A new tool for us is porous pavement. We're coming out with our first area-wide construction contract for porous pavement. That's in Brooklyn. It's breaking ground any day now. And it'll be 50,000 linear feet of porous pavement. It's in the streets and residential areas. We'll be doing this in the Bronx in 2 years. We're in design on it right now, and we're looking to advance that construction. But green infrastructure helps with street flooding because, as I mentioned, it's capturing that rainwater in the infiltration system before it gets to the sewer system, helping alleviate ponding, and create additional capacity in our sewers. This is just another image of porous pavement on the right. This is a testing that we did at a new site in the Rockaways last year. Porous pavement, what I really like to say is it manages a lot of stormwater. When we build it, we're building it in the gutter lane 4 feet out into the street, and we work really closely with Department of Transportation to do this. And we're capturing sometimes the entire street, and a lot of times just like half of the crown that the water is grading to that. It's a really good resiliency tool. We found it to be extremely effective. We're looking forward to rolling it more out. We've done pilot areas in all the boroughs except for Staten Island, and they've been pretty successful to date. So you'll see lots more happening in the future. Another new tool for us, particularly when we're talking about increased rainfall, is something we've been messaging as cloudburst management. So we've been, over the past 6-7 years, working closely with places like Copenhagen and Amsterdam who know how to manage water. And we have a sister city partnership with Copenhagen where we've had engineering and planning staff do a lot of deep dive and knowledge exchanges over the last several years. We are now mimicking one of their programs, a cloudburst management program. We're taking our green infrastructure, we're building it bigger, we're connecting it to offline storage. It'll be storage in parks properties, it'll be storage on private properties, school property, Department of Transportation, yards. We're working with all of our public agency partners to build more and build it better. And one plug I want to say for our colleagues at Parks, they had a really, really bad fiscal year, a lot of budget cuts, as everyone here is aware of. But they really preserved their green infrastructure funding to the very end. And I want to say we were involved, you know, as like a sister city agency relationship. We saw the emails go back and forth. They fought really hard for their budget and for green infrastructure in particular because they know how important it is for the communities. They were able to keep some of that funding. So this is just an image of our Cloudburst project, a concept design that we're doing in Queens. It's really connecting the roadways with other off-site properties. This is the New York Hall of Science, or the green space in front of the New York Hall of Science, where we'll be using a parking lot there to manage stormwater from the street to mitigate flooding. We do have one of these coming to the Bronx and the Parkchester and Morris Park neighborhoods. So we're excited for that. There's a map on our website that shows the boundary for that. And lastly, just a reminder, everyone has a part to play. Yes, we need city infrastructure to perform better and to do more for everyone, but we also need private property owners and public property owners to do their parts too. So we're looking at new strategies and new toolkits to engage landowners as well.
That is mine. Which one's forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
That space bar.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kevin Cavasso. I am the Deputy Director of Ecological Landscape Architecture with the Natural Resources Capital Design and Construction Team for New York City Parks. It is a mouthful. If you ever meet me, just say, hi, Kevin. You don't have to worry about the rest of it. I am here to talk about how at parks we are using nature to help basically combat climate change. So, we have over 2,000 acres of forest, over 650 acres of wetlands that we manage, 15 miles of trails or streams, and then over 128,000 street trees within the parks, or I guess streets and parks. They are crucial in managing climate change, right? The design and construction team works on forest restoration, wetland design, all of these things. We've conserved $9.3 million in energy conserved. There's $730,000 worth of air quality, and then storm intercepted almost $1.1 million. Basically, these are all benefits you're getting just from our natural resources that we help manage and improve. We've helped with the Natural Areas Conservancy develop the Forest Management Framework Plan. We've developed the Wetlands Management Framework Plan, and most recently, the Harlem River Watershed and Natural Resources Management Plan. All three of these plans are vital to us when we look for new sites, look for new opportunities, and we're trying to improve the environment and treat stormwater. I specifically have come to parks with a focus on green infrastructure itself. So my specialty is in helping to design stormwater capture systems and integrating them into existing parks, natural areas, and everything of the sort. These include rain gardens, subsurface detention systems, bioswales, and then also permeable pavements and permeable pavers. The pavers have been around for a while. We're starting to dabble into the permeable pavements. We haven't really gotten into that yet, in the Bronx anyway. So I want to share a couple of projects, parkland retrofits that we are currently in construction within the Bronx. We've been working on these for a really long time. These are projects that we've worked with DEP on specifically. There's the Parkside Playground. We're doing a small rain garden. You have Watson Gleason Playground, which just recently we were able to install the subsurface system and have done new pavement. And then there is the Magenta Playground, which we're going to be starting shortly. You'll notice the amount of water that's captured in these. The Watson Gleason one is capturing a far amount more water, but that has to do with like infiltration in the ground. So that system itself is highly efficient for what it's able to handle for stormwater wise. So we're really excited for that one going in. The other ones are also very important, but they don't really have as much infiltration. So you'll see that their capture is a little lower. This is a photo of Watson Gleason. If anyone lives in that neighborhood, you probably could have seen this going in a couple of weeks or a month ago. I believe they put those chambers in the ground. It is now covered up. It's new asphalt. And they're waiting to do color seal. So whenever we do these retrofits in parks, you get an added benefit of basically your park getting refreshing new asphalt, new color seal. In some cases, you get new site furnishings. If we were able to work with either someone from the commissioner's office or an elected representative, sometimes they'll give additional money for these projects to put in new furnishings. This is an area basically of all of our projects across all of the Bronx that we currently have. Some are in design, some are in construction, some are in pre-design where we've just recently gotten the go-ahead to advance. Specifically, Barretto Point and Spite and Dival are two that we're going to start working on shortly. I also want to point out that, while my team does the design and construction, when these projects get put into place, there's a lot of help that goes into it. We have a stewardship team that does a fantastic job of working with the people in the community. They help organize, and the community helps come out and plant these sites. I've been there, I've been a part of them. It's incredible to see the effort that the community puts in. I think last year alone, there were 81 events where the community got involved in, from planting trees to shrubs to plugs to cleanups along some of these areas. It's just incredible. So, yeah, if anyone is interested in volunteering even further, just reach out to the stewardship, although based on the numbers that I've seen of the stewards that exist across the Bronx and the number of organizations that exist, you guys are already well involved. So I really appreciate that and very thankful for it. Thank you.
Green infrastructure in the Bronx River. Well, while Daniel is getting my slides up, I can introduce myself. My name is Christian Murphy. I'm the Ecology Coordinator at the Bronx River Alliance. It's my pleasure to be representing the Alliance on this panel today. And I just want to share with you some examples of the green infrastructure features that we have actually helps to build and design along the Bronx River corridor, and sort of tell you a little bit about the direction that we're heading in as the Bronx River Alliance. So for anyone who's not familiar with our organization, we are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. We have a public-private partnership with the New York City Parks Department, for which we are very thankful for their support. And we've been in existence since November 2021. I'm sorry, 2001. So we are about 23 years old at this point. So yeah, we are the coordinated voice for the Bronx River. Our mission is to protect and restore the Bronx River corridor so that it can be a healthy ecological, educational, recreational, and economic resource for all the communities through which the river flows. The river is 23 miles long. It is New York City's only true freshwater river, but we are primarily focused on the 8 miles of river that flow through the Bronx, although we do some work, obviously, in Westchester County as well. So, of course, I can't really do a good job of this presentation without first acknowledging the work that went into laying the groundwork for restoration along the Bronx River. These are some shots of what the river used to look like, and I'll thank Dart Westfall for talking a little bit about that history earlier. But the shot on the left is from the 1940s, and so this is actually West Farms. This is where the 2 and 5 trains cross the Bronx River between West Farms, East Tremont Avenue, and 180th Street. It looks very different today, and that's really thanks to the hard work of community members who used to go down to the river without any proper PPE, no formal organization, just residents who didn't like having a filthy, nasty, disgusting open sewer in their backyard and wanted something that they could be proud of and that they could take their children to and they could walk their dogs along the river. And so that's a shot on the right of some of those community members. Dart shared an image earlier as well. But we owe our existence to the hard work of this community. We would not exist, this river would not be what it is today without their dedication. So I have to acknowledge that. This is another shot of Concrete Plant Park, so just off of Whitlock Avenue on the 6 train. It used to be a concrete plant. It was producing concrete that was shipped up and down the corridor either by barge, as you can see here, or by freight train. And thanks to the hard work of community members and some of our partners like YMPJ, we were able to convert that disused industrial space into a really gorgeous park. And so we pride ourselves on the work that we've done to restore parts of the Bronx River corridor and renaturalize them to make them both more appealing to wildlife as well as to the community members that live in these areas. So I encourage you to visit this park. It's a gorgeous park. But I want to draw some attention to some specific things that we've done recently. And before I get into it, I do want to define green infrastructure. If you look it up online, it's called the network or system of nature and natural-based features that provide ecosystem services to the areas where they're located. So it's a big mouthful. What that really means is it's using nature, it's man-made features that are mimicking the things that the Earth has done for millions of years. And so what are those things? Filtering water, purifying our air, buffering our shorelines from storm surges, and reducing heat, lowering the heat especially during the summer. Green spaces, you'll notice, are much cooler than the paved concrete areas around them. And so green infrastructure is trying to mimic those things that we've destroyed over the decades, and we've suffered from that. And so along the Bronx River corridor, we are trying to get back to that natural state, that natural those features that are going to protect our communities, as well as the natural resource which we love so dearly, which is the Bronx River. And so this is the restored salt marsh at Soundview Park. This used to be a landfill. There was about 12 feet of crap and garbage and just toxic materials in this location. And it has been successfully restored to its former glory as much as possible, which is a salt marsh. Which is a habitat feature that is really disappearing very quickly across the United States. Very unique, a lot of animals really depend on these spaces. And the amazing thing about these kinds of features is that they protect us as well. And so when a hurricane or a strong storm is coming, these features help to attenuate the waves and buffer the shoreline behind them. And so any residents living on the shore behind this area are actually going to be protected by this feature. And so we can consider this a green infrastructure feature. Here's a much more man-made example. This is in Shoelace Park. This is the Shoelace Park bioswale. It's a little under an acre in size, and you can see the diagram on the right kind of shows you a little bit about how it works. Doesn't look like a whole lot on the surface, it just kind of looks like an interesting garden, but underground is where kind of all the magic happens, and that is where water gets to infiltrate down towards the water table. And these features are really important not only by capturing polluted stormwater, so when it rains and there's dog waste and other garbage on the street, ordinarily that would get washed into a nearby waterway. These features actually help to absorb some of that pollution, as well as protect the areas from flooding. So this is one of our examples of a very useful and very effective green infrastructure feature. This is our headquarters at Bronx River House. So if you've ever been to Starlight Park, you may have seen this quirky looking building. A lot of people compare it to Jurassic Park in the summer. We're very proud of this space. This space combines a couple different green infrastructure features. And so one of them is permeable pavements. So that was mentioned earlier. So these are sort of paved areas which don't look like much but do actually allow water to infiltrate down, which protects the river and protects us from flooding. We also have a ton of rain gardens around River House. So these are habitats for pollinators and birds and some of our other wildlife that live along the river, and they're also helping to reduce the impacts of stormwater flooding. You may have heard that we did finally open up the final stage of Starlight Park last year in April 2023. Yes. So this was a massive, massive, massive effort. It involved dozens, probably hundreds of people across many different agencies, local, regional. It was very expensive, took a lot of effort and coordination, but we're very proud of this park. And I want to draw your attention to the sort of blue blobs that you can see within the park feature. Those blue blobs are basins. They're basically stormwater infiltration basins. And I'll show you an example of two of them here. So on the left, we have a detention basin. On the right, we have a retention basin. They look very similar. They operate in very similar ways. They are essentially capturing stormwater from the nearby neighborhood. The detention basin is designed to basically send water down to the water table or filter it quickly and send it to the river as quickly as possible. The retention basin actually is basically a pond. It always has standing water in it. It's essentially a wetland. After this basin was built and the park was opened, we saw bullfrogs move in, we had turtles move in. We did not put those wildlife there. They found their way to this space naturally, which is incredible. But both of these features are helping to both capture pollution from the neighborhoods as well as send floodwater that would otherwise, create standing puddles and ponds on the street and send it here where it's going to be a lot more useful. And so these are some examples of our green infrastructure. I don't know if I have any other examples. No. This is what we've done so far. This is just a small snapshot of what the Bronx River Alliance has done so far. And we are currently engaging in an update to our watershed management plan for the river. And so part of that process was to get input from community members in We did this in 3 different meetings. So we had one in White Plains, one meeting in Mount Vernon, and then one meeting in Hunts Point. And the idea was that we wanted to hear from the community. We wanted to know where we were seeing issues, where people were having problems with flooding, problems with access to the waterfront. We've kind of taken all of those comments and sort of synthesized them into the update to this watershed plan, which will guide us through hopefully the next 10 years of restoration efforts along the Bronx River. And we're hoping to see a lot more things like this. More infiltration basins, rain gardens, bioswales, and perhaps new technology that will further help to protect the communities along the river. If you remember back in 2021, Hurricane Ida actually did a big number on the Bronx River corridor. There was, feet and feet of flooding in Bronxville. People's ovens and washing machines were covered in floodwater. It was quite catastrophic. And based on predictions of the IPCC, which is the International Panel on Climate Change, we can expect more storms like Hurricane Ida in the future. And so we need to be prepared to handle them and to protect our communities. And we're going to do that through these plans that will help to build more green infrastructure in our sensitive areas. So we'll get more into that in our panel, but I just wanted to introduce a little bit of what the Bronx River Alliance has been up to, and happy to answer more questions in a bit.
Good afternoon, everybody. While we're getting that PowerPoint set up, my name is Shino. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Soil and Water Conservation District, which is part of a network of conservation districts nationwide. We are a natural resources conservation agency funded by the state, so we're a public entity, but we do a lot of outreach and education. We just completed a project with BCEQ and New York City DEP, conducting outreach on some things that I'm going to talk about. This is actually kind of interesting because I haven't been in front of this large number of people making presentations in over 4 years. So, I'm used to seeing you all in little rectangles, so it's a little bit unnerving, but we're going to get through this. Thank you, Christian. It was up there. Okay. Some of the green infrastructure benefits, luckily my prior speakers already talked about, so we can actually really quickly breeze through those. It's the second row, second from the right. Yeah, that one. Excellent. And now I have to deal with this thing. What do I do with this? Oh, wait, that's not the, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I can do this. All right. Thank you. So why we like green infrastructure very quickly, because you already heard this from other speakers, infiltration of rainwater, which prevents stormwater runoff. We are talking about air quality improvements as well, if there is green infrastructure with vegetation on top. We're also talking about reducing heat island effect and mitigating heat island effect in urban areas, reducing energy consumption costs. And here's a nice little picture of infrared photo of how actually a green roof can reduce your temperature on the rooftop. And also, traffic calming is another thing. New York City Parks Department used to do green streets before there were terms green infrastructure, and that was part of the traffic calming, slowing down drivers. And then we have these noise reduction as a benefit of green infrastructure as well. So there are multiple benefits to green infrastructure, which really, in my mind, should have vegetation. So porous pavements are great and we want them, but to the extent possible, we should have vegetation above ground combined with soil, because that's when you get to have these multiple benefits to their full extent. But then there are other benefits that we don't often talk about. So improved behavior. This is actually literature from environmental education and why environmental education and outdoor education is good for children. But what's good for children is good for adults too, right? I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to quickly tell you, when you expose children to outdoors, their behavior improves. Kids who can't sit still in the classroom can actually pay attention outdoors. So that is a benefit of green infrastructure. I'm including parks, wetlands, and all the things that Christian showed as part of the green infrastructure menu, as well as right-of-way bioswales and green roofs and green walls and all the other property-based green infrastructure. So this is a broad category of green infrastructure. Also, improved learning. So it makes sense if kids can sit still, being exposed to nature, they can actually learn better. So there's this research corroborating this notion. Kids learn better, and I bet you adults can learn better if you get yourself out there in nature and get your blood pressure down, right? Which leads you to improved mental health. And I have references for all these research as well. It improves your mental health. And you probably all know during COVID shutdown, what did you do? You went out to your park, right? And my park actually is hardly green infrastructure. I'm in Manhattan, so the closest park is the Hudson River Park. But it's an open space. I get to see the river, and it's an American Heritage River, if you didn't know. And it does have trees along, and having that urban park really got me through the worst of the pandemic. So we know what parks can do for humans and our mental health. So again, I want to tell the mayor, it's not an option. Parks are essential infrastructure that humans need for our well-being, physical, but also mental health. So those are the benefits of green infrastructure and some of the ones that are less talked about. So how do we get more green infrastructure in the Bronx? Carrots and sticks. We need both. So we do have laws, regulations, and incentives on the books already. I'm just going to quickly go through some of them. You probably know local law 92, 94 that requires either solar panels or green roofs on any new constructions or any significant renovations. Now, unfortunately, it's solar panels or green roof. So a lot of times people will just go for the solar panels because the incentives for solar panels are way better than green roofs. But newer research suggests that if you combine solar panels with green roof, you actually enhance the solar panel performance. So that's something we should look at. But regardless, if you're building a new building, then you have to have a green roof or solar panels now. That's the law. We also have yard planting regulation, which a lot of you probably don't know. If you live in certain zoning areas like R1 through R5, you can't pave over your front yard. It's against the law. But this is something a lot of people don't know. And there's no enforcement, right? Because the city's building department doesn't have enforcement officers walking around neighborhoods. So people get away with not doing it. And people, but honestly, they don't know that they can't pave it over. But that's one of the reasons why Karen and I teamed up, so that you all know when you're redoing your driveway next time, you can't just pave it over. You have to create vegetated areas. That's the law. We also have the Unified Stormwater Rule, which is something Melissa can tell you a lot more about. Again, if you're building a new building, you have to retain, 1.5 inches now or 1.5 inches of rainstorm on site. So these are all regulations and laws that new buildings are required to do and property owners in certain zoning districts need to do. But then there's the green roof tax abatement, which is an incentive. So if you want to put a green roof on your roof in your building, you can get a tax abatement, property tax, right? And that's a pretty significant incentive. And we are actually trying to improve that and make it more of an incentive. But if you are in the priority districts, which you can look up what they are online, you actually get a higher level of abatement. So that's something you should definitely look into if you have one of those buildings that could have a green roof. Then there is DEP programs. Green Infrastructure Grant Program is still available for green roofs, and it's a very relatively simple fee schedule, and there's a lot of technical support offered by the DEP, so you should definitely take advantage of that. And the newest program, the Resilient New York City Partners, which is actually, this is a really exciting program that I don't understand why so many more people are not taking advantage of this. You do need to have a property that's 50,000 square feet or larger. But if you do and want to have green infrastructure installed on your property, DEP does everything for you. Oh my God, it's amazing. So if you know property owners with that size properties, please get in touch with Melissa and it doesn't restrict your deed either. This is funded by what's known as the expense funding, which means there's nothing that goes on your property deed, which is a really good incentive for property owners. So definitely find out more about this. But I want to spend the rest of the time about something new to think about. What else can we do to incentivize green infrastructure? Well, let me talk to you about how we pay for water. We all pay for water. If you live in New York City, you're paying for water right now. Now, if you're renting, then you don't see the water bill. Your water bill is part of your rent. If you own a single-family home, you probably know what a water bill looks like. If you live in a co-op and condo, your treasurer or your management agent has seen the water bill, and your water bill is incorporated into your maintenance. So a lot of people in New York City have never seen this document, which is the water bill. But that doesn't mean you're not paying for it. You're still paying for it, okay? So it's not surprising people don't know what you're actually paying for. Yes, you're paying for water, but what does that mean? It means your water bill is actually composed of two parts. One is the amount of water you use out of the tap. That's the drinking water, the potable portion. The second part is what they call the wastewater part. And that is actually 159% of the potable water use. But that wastewater is actually two separate costs. It's the sewage and stormwater management. So your water bill is potable water plus wastewater, and that wastewater component, it's paying for sewage and stormwater management. And it's the 159% of the water that you actually use. So to reiterate, everybody is paying for stormwater management right now. Every single one of you, unless you live in Westchester or along Nassau or Suffolk, okay. And the amount you pay for stormwater is based on how much water you use, which doesn't make sense because if you think about properties like the one on the left, that might be a Home Depot or something with flat roof and a 300-car parking lot. That compared to brownstones or smaller residential buildings, right? Actually, the residential ratepayers are probably paying more because the Home Depot only has one bathroom or two bathrooms, and you're paying for water you use plus 159% for both stormwater and wastewater. Whereas a property owner on the right, because they have two bathrooms or four bathrooms, they're using a lot of water because they're also doing laundry, dishwasher, and all that stuff, they're paying a lot. But if you think about it, stormwater generation has nothing to do with how much water you use. It has everything to do with what kind of property your building is. So the Home Depot on the left is producing gallons and gallons of stormwater every time it rains, while the brownstones on the right, not so much, right? It's a smaller property and smaller impervious area. Yet, those ratepayers on the right are paying a lot. In essence, the ratepayers on the right is paying for stormwater management of the properties like on the left. That's what we're doing right now. So many of us are actually advocating to separate out that wastewater charge that are two parts, remember, right? Separate them out. Charge 100% of the water use for sewer because what goes in goes out. Makes sense. But separate out the stormwater charge from that wastewater charge and think about a different way of charging for stormwater that's based on the type of property you have. That would be an equitable way of paying for stormwater management. So that's what we want to see happen. Three components into the water bill. One is based on usage. One is also based on usage because wastewater is directly related to how much water you use. And then the third component of stormwater really related to the type of property. So I know I'm out of time. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to share the PowerPoint with you all so you can take a look at it. Thank you so much. And there is going to be Q&A, so I can ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everybody. Let's see if that helps at all for the brightness in your eyes. And the number? Yeah, putting it back up. Well. All right. So we've got a couple prepared questions. We're going to wrap this up by 2:30, and you'll have a little break, and then we'll go to workshops. There's no break. Okay. Wow. Wow. Huh? 20 minutes. All right. 20 minutes. So our first question, we do have a mic on the table that you can pass around and opt in to answer. So the first question we have is, which impacts from climate change can green infrastructure address, and what are the limitations? Is there anybody who would like to answer that one?
Okay. So green roofs are great for climate mitigation or climate resiliency. It has been known to reduce the temperature of the building, particularly the floor directly under the green roof. And I think Javits Center with their green roof has saved something like $1 million a year in utility bills. So the savings in energy consumption, it's quite significant. And that is definitely something that we should be thinking about as we want to make our city more resilient.
I was going to mention cloudburst flooding. And so this is a term that is fairly new, probably for most people. We used to traditionally think about New York City as a coastal city and the biggest threats kind of from, hurricane storm surge. And then we've been proven recently that actually inland areas are becoming more and more susceptible to flooding because the amount of rain falling from our clouds these days is increasing because a hotter atmosphere actually holds more water. And so one of the things that green infrastructure can do is to capture the excess rainwater that's falling now to prevent, ponding and flooding and the Bronx River Parkway from turning into a secondary river. Those kinds of things can be attenuated by green infrastructure features built along our pervious surfaces.
Yeah, I would like to follow up with that. Within the parklands themselves, we can use the parklands to try to capture and store the stormwater, basically. But there are limitations to that, and that is space. With these cloudburst events, it's huge amounts of water that are coming down. You've seen them in the last few years. I mean, I think we had a couple within the past 6 months. I think there was one in end of September and again in January, where there was a huge flooding events. But space is one of the biggest things where we can capture and store it and slow the water down. We're trying to implement some more natural systems to do that across a couple of parks. There's the cloudburst that we're talking about. There's the detention systems underground. The Bronx is unique in the fact, though, that there's a huge amount of ledge that lives under the ground, and that has a big impact on what we can actually store in the ground. And infiltration, which, as I showed on one of the slides, the one playground that had huge infiltration or high infiltration rates could capture much more stormwater.
Yeah, I'll just touch on limitations because everyone did a great job of covering what can we do. Other limitations, as in addition to the subsurface and geophysical maintenance. I think, we're talking about distributed infrastructure. It's a lot different than centralized infrastructure where you're sending one maintenance crew and, they know what they're doing. It's, they have an O&M plan. It's all in one location, couple trucks, head that way. But when you're talking about distributed assets across the city. I'm not sure that we're all quite prepared to really put in the effort that it takes to keep these things operating and ready and available for the next rain event. So I think we need to rethink our approach to maintaining these critical infrastructure assets and understanding the limitations, in doing so.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point. And some studies have found that when the rain gardens and these other features fall into disrepair, they don't work properly. And so we're putting in all the effort to build these things, and we're not getting the full benefits from them. But there is one example that I do want to draw on, and it's actually a coalition called the RAIN Coalition, which stands for Rain Garden Action in Neighborhoods. And this is a coalition that the Bronx River Alliance is a part of, as well as Newtown Creek Alliance, Gowanus Canal Conservancy, and the HOPE program, which is a workforce development program in the South Bronx. And this is actually geared to try to pay people to maintain these features. And so one of these things that the benefits is it's putting people to work. And it's putting them to work making sure that these features are going to be actually protecting us and functioning properly. So we're really just kind of getting started in this process, but it could be a model for how the city can move forward, putting people to work and making sure that these green infrastructure features are actually going to work and do the things that we're building them to do. So we're in early days now, but hopefully good things will come from these coalitions going forward.
Thank you. Next question we've got is, what are some challenges to implementing or building green infrastructure in the Bronx and across the city? And maybe, we also talk about the scale that's needed.
I'll jump on that one and then I'll pass it along. As we're updating the Bronx River Watershed Plan, we've been looking at locations where we could be installing green infrastructure, where the opportunity and potential exists. And as you mentioned before, the bedrock is so close to the surface in the Bronx in so many places that we just can't dig deep in some of these neighborhoods. We've tried it, it becomes expensive, it doesn't really work very well, it's hard for the water to infiltrate in some locations. And so that's proved challenging. And other parts of the city where the ground is softer, they have a much easier time building these infiltration systems. And it's just proven to be a little bit more of a challenge in parts of the Bronx. And so that's going to take some innovative thinking to get around. So that's one challenge that we're facing here.
So I work with green roof installers, and sometimes they tell me the bureaucracy of the city permitting process is a hurdle. But there are tools that we can develop, such as in Chicago, they have what's called the green permitting process, and it's an expedited permit process for projects that are considered green, sustainable, and that's something that the city of Chicago defined. So there are these small-scale incentives to really remove barriers from building green infrastructure for private property owners. So I just wanted to mention that. We don't have that green permitting process yet, but it's something that I'm interested in pushing forward on.
I just want to put in a plug for porous pavement. Shino, I know there's not a green component, but one thing we're doing, we're building porous pavement in areas where we've had challenges building rain gardens because of high bedrock or because of high groundwater. Bronx is one of those areas where bedrock has prevented us from building a lot of rain gardens. So we're coming in with porous pavement where we can build it in the street, and it's a shallower asset. We're only digging down 2 feet. Manages a lot of stormwater, more than our rain gardens. What we're doing in addition to the porous pavement is we're putting a tree in any empty tree pit we find when we're out there on the streets. That's a partnership we have with Parks. Thank you, Parks. They're giving us free trees for this. Again, I just want to say they're doing what they can with a very constrained budget. And so we're really thankful for that partnership, because when people see us out there, we're the green infrastructure program. They want to see green, and Parks is bringing the green for us.
I just want to add on to, the permeable pavement. Because of the parking lots that we have, parking is very hard to give up or take away from the residents. So we have a couple projects where we explored using permeable asphalt as a way to capture a lot of the stormwater. And then what we've done is we've gone in and removed pavement that existed over tree pits, where they were blocked over. We've removed all the block. We've installed different types of soil media underneath the asphalt to help increase tree growth, which then helps the trees and everything else. But yeah, I think the benefit of permeable paving, it is there for different areas, for tight areas. So.
So I should have also mentioned, the DEP tried to put a lot of rain gardens in certain neighborhood in Queens, and the residents came out against it. So I'm not saying those residents are wrong, but I am saying that we need to educate people. We need to educate everybody about the benefit of having green infrastructure so that they don't just think this is, weedy or unwieldy or unnecessary. If people understood the true benefit of green infrastructure and how they could really actually mitigate flooding in the neighborhood and increase other benefits, air quality, traffic calming, and all the stuff that I talked about, I think we would be able to do more. And I'm not knocking down porous pavement, Melissa. We know we need to put them in, and I do like them because you can do them so easily and fast and so many. So yes, we should do them. But we also need to educate New Yorkers about the importance of green infrastructure.
Thank you all. Yeah, and it's great to hear the collaboration that's happening. I know we've got a project happening on East Tremont and 177th Street, and they are following the rules of they have to put in green infrastructure that will hold on to some of that stormwater. And we've seen the bus stop where people can't even get to it because it's just flooded. Although DEP has fixed that, so thank you. And what are there any from the folks here climate risks that we're not yet addressing with our green infrastructure or other strategies that you're aware of?
So it was mentioned before, but rising groundwater. So the water table is getting closer to the surface, sea level rise is making that worse, and rain gardens are not going to work. These infiltration basins are not going to work when the water is right there, because the water doesn't have anywhere to go. And so this is, it's an emerging threat, and we do need some comprehensive solutions to work around that, because once the sea level rises and once the water table is up here, if we let it get to that point, these current existing features are not going to work anymore, or they're not going to work as well as they were intended to work.
This is actually not really an answer to this question, but it's something that I wanted to mention, which is this notion of green gentrification. This is an idea that has actually gained attention in recent years, and there are researchers actually studying this. It is something that we really have to think carefully about, especially when Dart was showing us all the things that are going to be happening in the Bronx, which is absolutely wonderful. It makes me so excited, but at the same time, we need to be thinking about what will those green amenities do to the neighboring communities, and especially in some of the disinvested communities, historically disinvested communities in the Bronx. I think it is a super important question that we should be thinking about. And we may need to be reaching out to housing advocates and community development advocates and workforce development advocates to really think this through in a holistic manner so that we don't end up with unintended consequences from all these wonderful greening projects.
Yeah, we in our conversations with community, this has been something that's come up, and while we focus at the Bronx River Alliance on the ecological impacts, people and communities in the Bronx are part of that ecology, and so we have to keep all of that in mind. I'm trying to wrap some of these questions into one. But thank you, Karen. How much do we need to scale, and what are the projects that we should be focusing on in the Bronx? I heard there's opportunities for private landowners of a certain size. Is that the biggest opportunity? Are there other opportunities with government-owned land or other types of zoned areas?
I mean, I can touch on, I think areas that are very important from the natural resources side is, and builds on sea level rise, is getting some of the salt marshes restored basically along the edges of the Bronx. Those are large areas where we could put funding into. We have some projects right now that are just, they're ready to go. They're just, the funding's not there for them to go. Or even just there's land ownership, hurdle issues, bureaucratic stuff that we have to get through. But I think along the coastline, the salt marshes is a huge place that we could try to focus on. And it's not really dealing with stormwater that's falling on the streets, but it's dealing with the sea level rise and erosion of land that's occurring because of the lack of salt marshes.
Considering the majority of properties are private in New York City, I think we do need to put a lot more efforts into green infrastructure on private properties. But from a stormwater perspective, not necessarily climate change, but from stormwater, road surfaces is a huge contributor to stormwater, and therefore also flooding, right? So I'm not quite sure what we need to do to bring both New York City and New York State DOT to the table as a fuller partner, but we need to be really thinking about how we address stormwater generated on our roadways.
Thanks. Melissa, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Shino. Over 60% of the land in New York City is owned by private landowners. That's why we implemented the unified stormwater rule. We do have a low redevelopment rate. I mean, it looks like we don't, but it is actually only about a little over 1% a year. So we'll capture new development, but it's going to take a lot of time. So retrofits are really important. And I agree, roadways are major contributors. Karen and I had a good conversation about state arterial highways and state-owned roads in the city. There's a lot of stormwater runoff generated from these very, very impervious areas, and there are some impacts to communities happening, and we need some new technologies too. There's a lot of people who come to us and they say, how can we capture stormwater from this arterial highway, and can we put rain gardens under a bridge? And you know, it's hard, if you have shaded area, you're not going to get plant survival, and so we need to come up with some new concepts, plug and play type things. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of really smart people in the community, so definitely bring your ideas to all the agencies working together.
Great, thank you. Sounds like we're going to have a green hackathon. Is there like, maybe we'll have one time for one question from the audience? I see 3 hands, so why don't you all, Bob, and then Ellen, and then Karen, why don't you just say your questions and we'll see how we combine, answer, and close out.
Question, I know the Bronx River has a strong partnership with Westchester. Is the river watershed plan also kind of a strong upland connection, like we are some traffic that carry groundwater from Westchester County to the Bronx and just here? And just a plug for thinking of park and climate adaptation. And if this was a perfect world for the city of New York, talking climate adaptation parks.
Okay, and just for understanding, it's like how are we incorporating the geography and the okay. Ellen? How are we talking with the Army Corps of Engineers? Thank you. Karen?
I would like to look at ways of increasing the design storm use for the green infrastructure. Since it's not connected to the system, it could overflow theoretically into the ground where it's situated, even if it is a high rock place, like they say in Bronx.
So this would be for like separated storm systems?
Well, right now the standard is,
Okay.
the standard is, I can't.
It's okay.
Standard is one thing, and can't do anything with it, but in terms of green infrastructure, because it's a standalone facility, maybe we could raise it up to like the 100-year storm, or 500-year or whatever.
Oh. Wow, all right, we're not gonna get a break. I'm sorry, well, I'm glad the timer went off because then we feel better about ignoring it a little bit. And so some of the things we want to touch on is how are we planning around the Harlem River watershed? How are we talking with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? And how are we designing future infrastructure around to avoid future problems? And if you want to also close out, answer a question, and then we'll do a quick closeout if there's any calls to action. Just hot mic, yeah, I know.
For the Harlem River watershed, I have to admit, I cannot answer that right now. I might have to get through the plan. I know it targets, it talks about the salt marsh restorations, there's playground, stormwater opportunities throughout it. How much it's targeting into Westchester, I'm not entirely sure, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Is maybe the Tibbetts Brook daylighting would be redirecting some of that water, because currently Tibbetts Brook is directed into a sewer, which then contributes to sewer overflows. I think, yeah, there might be some coordination possible with Yonkers, of course. Yeah.
So in terms of Army Corps of Engineers, there's a coalition of organizations working to resist the proposal to build barriers, and that's Rise to Resiliency Coalition. It's spearheaded by Waterfront Alliance. So if you're interested, you can get in touch with Karen. You're on that coalition, right? Yeah, you can get in touch with Karen. And Bronx River Alliance, and I'm marginally on that as well.
Yeah, if you have anything to add, otherwise we'll close out. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say last year, DEP announced a new Bureau of Coastal Resilience, and we hired an amazing woman, Lorianne Farrell. She started I think in May of last year. She's staffing up her new bureau, and she is working directly with Army Corps, and I think you'll hear more about that as her bureau becomes staffed. We're also working with Army Corps on a potential new cloudburst project through some WRDA funding, and I'm excited, to dig into that a little bit more. The other question about designing green infrastructure for larger storms, Karen, this is something you've been asking us to do for several years. We have started doing it in some of our program areas just for you. I'm just kidding, not just for you. Where we have space, we do go for larger storms. So in Resilient NYC Partners, we manage up to 2 inches of rainfall, and a lot of that has to do with, our cost efficiencies. But some of our right-of-way assets, the rain gardens, they're constrained. And so we're managing an inch of stormwater there. And I know that's not enough for Karen. But when we have more space on parks properties and private properties, we do go twice that sometimes. So we'll keep pushing. Yes.
All right, well, Melissa, if you want to start just closing us out, if there's anything like 1 or 2 recommendations you'd say for folks to take individually or collectively or civically, and thank you. And if the panelists hang around, you can, ask them more questions, but no promises.
Well, I just want to steal something that Shino said. If green infrastructure is important to you all, talk to your neighbors about it, and talk to educators who are working with our, school children, and so that they can convince their parents that it's a great strategy. But Shino is right, we do get pushback in a lot of neighborhoods. I know it doesn't happen that often in the Bronx, but in Queens, we're getting hit really hard, and in South Brooklyn, we're getting hit really, really hard. So we do have people coming out and laying down in front of our excavators and saying, no rain gardens. So if you want rain gardens, please help us get the word out. We would really appreciate it.
I think I would just add that, your involvement in the community, your volunteer work is super important to green infrastructure thriving. As Christian said, we're putting in there's a huge amount of bioswales going in, grain gardens, everything, and we just need help to help maintain that and keep it functioning properly. So, the volunteer work, the stewardship work that Parks organizes and puts out you know, I think it's very important to continue to do that, and thank you for the work you have done already, so.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I would say if you're able to go to your community board meetings and get the ear of your council members, please do that. They will listen to their constituents, and if their constituents are saying we need more green infrastructure, they're going to, you know, see what they can do about that. But if no one is mentioning it at these meetings, it might go unnoticed. And so we really want everybody, as much as possible, get the ear of your elected officials and let them know this is a priority for you, if it's a priority for you, and I hope it is. So that we can have our elected officials actually get on board and help to direct funding and resources where it needs to go.
Like it or not, the climate is changing. So investing in green infrastructure, including our parks, is actually an investment in our future. If we don't spend the money now to do what we need to do, we are going to end up spending a lot more money later on. And I know it's hard for politicians to wrap their mind around this concept of life after 4 years, but we need to somehow get them to understand this is about the future of the city. If we can't put money into it this year, then we're going to end up paying more, and you may not be in the office, but that's your concern. For us, we're going to be here 4 years from now, from 8 years from now, God willing. And they need to do the right thing. We elect them to do the right thing, not for them to get reelected after 4 years. So they really need to just put money into it today so that we don't have to pay for a lot more later. So we need to get more good candidates in the office, is what I will end with.
All right, thank you all for all your hard work all the time and for making the time to talk to us today. So thank you.